Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 303. Shi Shengpeak. Shuemeng from the other life. There was an unfathomable chasm in front of the path of martyrdom. This chasm was the result of Chu Wanning's previous use of the corpse-splitting technique. The rain poured down into the ravine like a waterfall. Above the chasm, a man in a black gold robe stood with his back to them, a blade held in one hand, his aura soaring. Hearing the commotion, the man's fingers moved slightly and he slowly turned his head around. It was Mo Ran. His heart felt like it had been cut by a stone in the wind. Chu Wanning stared at the person in front of him in disbelief. What was going on? Rumble. Blinding white lightning flashed, followed by thunderous roars. The pale light illuminated the blood-stained face of Taxian Jun. That face was truly terrifying and Shi Mei couldn't help but take a step back. However, Chu Wanning involuntarily took 2 steps forward. Blood stains. His face was covered in bloody wounds. Apart from his face, every inch of skin that was exposed was crisscrossed, flesh and blood turning upside down. He was like a dismembered corpse that hadn't fallen into pieces. Because the blade was not sharp enough. His entire body was covered with cracks. He could still see the handsome face of the past. Chu Wanning's lips turned white as he stood in the heavy rain, staring at the dead body that had been slashed into 1,000 pieces. The living dead also stared at him, a pair of black and white pupils filled with blood and tears. His mind was blurry as memories and thoughts fought in his mind. His 2 souls were fighting. Perhaps it was because it hurt too much, but he couldn't help but use his free hand to hold onto the side of his face. Dark red blood dripped from his fingers along with the rain. His thick eyelashes trembled. There was the fury of Taxian Jun and there was also Grandmaster Mo's bewilderment. Why are you doing this to me? Chu Wanning. Why did you kill me? The man was startled, his eyes reflecting Chu Wanning's reflection. Slowly, his expression became helpless and gentle. He muttered, Shizun, is there something I didn't do well? No. Did I make you unhappy again? Hearing his voice, Chu Wanning's mind was in a mess. He thought, was that Taxian Jun in the rain? No. No, that's Mo Ran. Regardless of whether it was Taxian Jun or Grandmaster Mo, both were Mo Ran. Mo Ran, bathed in blood, staggered toward him. Beneath the blood was a corpse's white face, its open eyes unfocused, filled with grief. What have I done to disappoint you? You did this to me. The rain was so cold that it seeped into his bones. He just watched as Mo Ran walked step by step towards him. Mo Ran was crying and his eyes were filled with blood. Stop hitting me with the whip, I'll hurt too. No matter how stupid, how slow. You hit me. I'm in pain too. Shizun. From a slight tremble to a violent one, Chu Wanning could not stand still anymore. He was on the verge of breaking down. He fell to his knees, curled up in the rain, his stomach torn and crushed by claws. He looked more dead than Mo Ran did in front of him. I'm sorry. Chu Wanning lamented in a hoarse voice. I'm sorry. Your scar is as long as my pain. All your blood and hate ended up in my body. He knelt in front of Mo Ran, hunched and wincing. He used all the courage he had left to raise his head, but when he looked at the body that he had failed, he sobbed, I'm the one who let you down. He didn't know where he had made a mistake, but it was probably because the living dead Perons with souls still inside couldn't be considered as real corpses, so the corpse-splitting spell didn't fully take effect. Mo Ran did not die, but he was mad. The memories of his life, whether he was in pain or madness, or confusion, or sadness, rushed up one after another. He was Mo Weiyu, Grandmaster Mo, Taxian Jun and Ran Air. Countless pieces of debris had formed into this utterly broken man in front of him. Mo Ran. Upon hearing his voice, Mo Ran's pupils began to twirl. The rain was red at his feet and there was blood all over the place. After pausing for a while, This man whose spiritual sense had been split suddenly became irritable, as if another consciousness had invaded him. He began to pace back and forth, his sinister expression appearing all the more terrifying on his distorted face. Chu Wanning. You hate me so much that you want to take my life at all costs, don't you? I hate you too. I wish I could tear your corpse into 1,000 pieces and eat your intestines. I wish I could let you be martyred for thousands of generations. You can't blame me, you're the one who killed me. His sleeves fluttered as his eyes widened in anger. He was so furious that he seemed like he was about to burst forth and strangle Chu Wanning by the throat and shatter him into pieces. However, it was like a bow breaking before it was full or a sword breaking before it was drawn. With an explosive sound, a blue light shot into Taxian Jun's chest. Taxian Jun's eyes dimmed and then, suddenly, he fell silent. After a few short pauses, he slowly straightened up and stood very coldly by the side of the road. Chu Wanning turned around to see Shimei holding onto the boulder, shaking it, still throwing the incantation. His pair of peach blossom eyes were fierce and manic, gleaming with an intense light. I think I'm done reminiscing about the past. Shimei clenched his teeth and formed a seal with his 2 fingers. He stared at the bloody Taxian Jun and said, Do you know what's the most important thing for you? Since you aren't dead yet, hurry up and help me collect the last 30 pieces. Be quick, he said, panting. Under the flame of the talisman, the previously chaotic face of Taxian Jun, which was intertwined with good and evil, became as calm as still water, as cold as snow. The madness in his eyes, the resentment, all the emotion vanished. Taxian Jun gave a brief nod of his head, and the blade in his hand lit up. He answered almost numbly, Yes. Master. After he finished speaking, he raised his hand and cast a protection barrier to protect Shimei. Then, like an eagle, his black robe flew towards the front hall. However, as he rose into the air, a figure appeared in front of him. Chu Wanning stopped him. His entire body was drenched and his heart was already crushed. He wished that he could just turn into mud and dust and die in the storm. But he still had to stop it. If only there were more people to enjoy life. That was what Mo Ran had told him when he was awake, so no matter how painful or exhausted he was, he had to hold on until the very end. Chu Wanning said hoarsely, Huaxia, come forth. Taxian Jun gazed at the familiar golden light that appeared on his palm. A frown could be seen on his forehead. Huaxia. Under the heavy rain. The world was collapsing into boundless blood sea. They had had a similar day many years ago. On that day, both of them had offered up all of their hot blood to each other. They had spent all of their strength and energy to fight, causing the sky and earth to change color and the golden crows to sink into the earth. Who would have thought that the battle between Shizun and disciple from that lifetime would once again descend into the human world, despite the passage of time? A person's life was destined to come to an end. It was just like how Nangongzi was destined to die in his prime. Yawangzi was destined to become a beauty and the Shisheng Peak's destiny was impossible to escape from. Taxian Jun and Chu Wanning were fated to fight face to face. Whether it was out of hate or love, they couldn't escape. Buletin Gui. Come. An incandescent voice slowly sounded out and a ghostly green light shone into the eyes of Taxian Jun. Now that he was under Shimei's full control, there were no emotions in his eyes. He was like a mirror from hell, reflecting the lonely figure of Chu Wanning in the rain. Sword chi breaking clouds, horizontal blade reversing the rain. In the strong wind, a black and white figure were fighting each other, their spirits colliding. They swiftly disassembled their attacks from the storm. In an instant, sand leveled off the ground, gales raged as water splashed in all directions around the two of them. They were like a snowy sea that was frothing, yet it also seemed like a cloud of dust had risen. None of them slacked. They fought with all their might, fighting from the back of the mountain all the way to the front of sky-reaching pagoda. The momentum of this battle broke the clouds and shook the earth. At this moment, the people on the top and bottom of the mountain were all alarmed and raised their heads to look at each other. Is it Chu Wanning? How did he get into a fight with Mo Ran? Aren't the two of them in the same group? The raindrops fell like thousands of horses trampling on the ground. On Shisheng Peak, the golden light in Chu Wanning's hand pierced through the sun, aiming for the chest of Taxian Jun. However, before the light could reach, there was the sound of an explosion. The brilliant sun burst forth from the palm of Taxian Jun with the force of lava, as if a volcano torrent had swallowed up all of the golden energy. Bam! In an instant, broken tiles and broken bricks flew everywhere and the surrounding trees were uprooted. At this moment, Jiang Shi was facing off against the Zhenlong chess pieces in front of the entrance. His reaction was very fast as he shouted, "Everyone be careful." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly conjured a barrier to protect the people around him. The flying stones and flying rocks, the uprooted trees, all smashed into his barrier. It was extremely difficult for Jiang Shi to hold on. He vomited a mouthful of blood as he fell to one knee, his lips red. Open a barrier. I can't block it a second time. At this time, many cultivators panicked as they frantically took out their barrier umbrellas. They looked up towards the direction of sky-reaching pagoda and could not help but be stunned. Mo Weiyu and Chu Wanning, what kind of strength was this? In front of the pagoda, the Shizun and disciple duo were engaged in an increasingly intense battle. In this world, other than him, there was probably no other person who could withstand so many attacks from Taxian Jun. Only Chu Wanning could. The man in front of him, with his sharp blade and his feet moving around, looked exactly the same as before. Chu Wanning had personally taught him this. It was at this Shisheng Peak and there were even a few times when he was in front of sky-reaching pagoda that he adjusted the movements of Mo Ran and repeatedly told him the mantra and the mental cultivation method. From the ignorant youngster to the moment when their weapons clashed. This was the second time that the Baidu immortal, Chu Wanning had gone up against the Emperor Mo Weiyu, his disciple. In that battle, Chu Wanning had come with a sword in his arms. There was still hope in his heart. He thought he could save a misguided disciple and so he gave it his all. However, this time, Chu Wanning knew that there was no turning back. Regardless of victory or defeat, the person he wanted to redeem the most was not going to come back. Those who stand in my way shall die. In front of his eyes, it was as if the scene of a teenager Mo Ran using his sword practice flashed past. The young child's forehead was covered in sweat and under the rising morning light, he stepped on the bamboo leaves and soared into the air, dragging out 3 sword flowers before lightly landing on the ground. He turned around and grinned at Chu Wanning. "Shizun, do you think I've learned well?" Flames burst out from his palm as he struck his chest. Chu Wanning dodged to the side and Taxian Jun's bloody palm brushed against his clothes. But when Mo Ran had sparred with him in the Red Lotus Pavilion, it was clearly this move as well. At that time, the young man's palm was still perfectly trimmed and had no scars whatsoever. The young man's face was very gentle as he looked at him. Then he smiled and held his hand, saying, "I won't spar with you anymore. If you keep hitting me, there would be no end to it." The saber howled and the sword cried. Chu Wanning suddenly thought of the Yuliang village. Mo Ran had dragged him with him to watch the opera by the lake and now, the sound of the drums rang out. The performer by his ear sang loudly, "The Lord's will is exhausted." On the stage, a face was painted with colorful paint and Mo Ran was watching intently from below. Chu Wanning raised his head and Mo Ran immediately pulled himself away from the eternal sorrow and raised his eyes from his childhood wish. He smiled and asked, "Is it good?" His eyes were dark and very warm. Chu Wanning had once thought that the scenes were very long and tedious. A single word was broken down into 3 words to sing. He did not know what was so nice about it. But at this moment, he really wanted to return in front of that stage and watch the opera in the village. Blowing fire, Wu Shen drumming towards the river. The martial arts world was brilliant. That scene, if only it could be sung for a lifetime, how good would it be? Clang. All of a sudden, Huaisha was shot down. It was the same back then as well. When the divine sword fell behind, he immediately retreated and summoned Tianwen as a temporary shield. However, this time, Taxianjun was a level stronger. Thus, before Chu Wanning could retreat, the sheathless black blade was already pointed at his chest. Taxianjun narrowed his eyes. His vision turned grey and he could not tell who he was pointing at. He only knew that the opponent's spirit had run out. He was like a man who had run on the night of Mount Liang, listening to the reeds all night long and singing from all directions. All that remained was the stubborn resistance on the road. What a nuisance! The thin lips parted and a saber slashed down. In this moment of life or death, a profound gold fan flew in from the side, straight towards Taxianjun. The incoming fan attack was extremely fierce and powerful. Taxianjun immediately retreated, but he was unable to parry his blade. However, he was still forced to take a step back by the golden fan attack. Soon after, 3 interweaving red and blue light formations descended from the sky with the might of thunder, trapping Taxianjun within. Who? In that moment, Taxianjun was unable to move. He could not help but grind his teeth and angrily shouted, "Show yourself!" 3 blurry figures stood at the top of the sky-reaching pagoda. They jumped down from the torrential downpour and landed steadily in front of the long stairs. At this time, their faces could finally be seen clearly. The 3 of them. A fox fur hat was on his forehead and his eyes were flighty. One of them had blonde hair that was tied up and a cold look in his eyes. The person standing at the front looked to be in his 30s or 40s, dressed in a suit of blue armor, with a pair of sharp eyes and a calm expression, a knife scar running diagonally across his left forehead. There was not a single trace of arrogance on his face, only calmness and a thickness of something similar to Shui Zhenyang. The man raised his hand and caught the profound gold fan that had come spinning back. He raised his eyes that could no longer hold his youth. It was the Mei brothers from this world, and a clap of thunder split the air. Chu Wanning looked at that man. It was this mortal world's Shui Meng. End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 304. Shi Shengpeak, their other life. The Shui Meng of this world and lifetime stood there amidst the strong wind and rain, his voice hoarse and fierce. He opened his mouth, closed it again and again as the jut in his throat rolled several times. When he opened his mouth, he said, "Disciple Shui Meng greets Shizun." A simple line that has not been uttered for more than 10 years. After saying this sentence, Shui Meng felt all sorts of emotions surge through his throat. It was so painful that he could not speak and he could no longer say a second sentence. Behind him, Mei Hangxiu said, "Zimming, focus." The appearances of the 2 brothers from the Mei family didn't change in this world and lifetime. However, each of them had a trace of steadiness in their brows and their spiritual energy had far surpassed that of the previous time. I know that your emotions are in turmoil, but you can't let your spiritual flow be in turmoil with you. I just saw the younger you who has come into this world. If you lose this fight again, you will lose face in front of your younger self. Hurry and come back to reality. Shui Meng was no longer that reckless and ignorant youth from before. He knew Mei Hangxiu was right, so even though he was reluctant to part with him, he took a deep breath and shifted his gaze away from Chu Wanning and back to Taxianjun. "Who are you people?" Taxianjun, who was standing in the middle of the formation, narrowed his eyes dangerously. "You want to court death?" Mei Hangxiu was startled. "What's going on? He doesn't seem to recognize us." Chu Wanning took a deep breath and said, "He has completely lost consciousness. He will recognize no one now." Shui Meng. If it was said that when he had seen Chu Wanning, he was already agitated. Then, at this moment, when he heard that familiar voice again that he could only hear in his dreams before, Xuemeng could no longer hold back his tears as they slowly filled his eyes. Just how many years had passed already? He didn't dare look back at those years. He was afraid that if he tried to remember, tears would cascade down his face. The thing was, time passed by very quickly for him. He still remembered the first year of Chu Wanning's captivity, when he was at the prime of his lifespan. At that time, he was running all over the place by himself to beg for help. However, perhaps it was because he was too arrogant in the past, but no one paid any attention to him. Later on, he had finally gathered a troop. He wanted to rescue the people in the Devil's Lair as soon as possible, but they felt that he was too impulsive and selfish, so they mocked and ridiculed him. At that time, Mei Hangxiu was deployed and was not at the front line. He was on his own and could only go up the mountain by himself. But what was waiting for him on the mountain? It was the place where things changed when they died. What he found was the dying Emperor Taxian Jun and the corpse of Chu Wanning by the side of the cold pond in the reed lotus pavilion, which had disintegrated into ashes upon the death of Taxian Jun. Almost 10 years. The man he had waited for almost 10 years had become a corpse, which body had crumbled to ashes right in front of him. The pillar supporting him had disappeared, and all he could do was cry like a helpless child on his knees amidst the swirling ashes. He was too late. He didn't even manage to touch the corner of his Shizun sleeve. He could no longer hear Chu Wanning call out to him, "Xuemeng." After that, things became even more frightening. Taxian Jun had returned from the dead, and Shi Mingjing had revealed his green fangs. They had started a massacre, and the human world had been reduced to a ghost realm. To Xuemeng, the deaths of his old friends had transformed him. When he was young, he had buried a jug of Dukang wine under the laurel tree, but when he dug it up again, who would drink it with him? Therefore, Xuemeng didn't know how much effort he had put in to take away the first glance he had of Chu Wanning 10 years later. This time, I didn't come too late. Shizun, I'll come help you. At this time, the younger Xuemeng from the other mortal world also arrived together with the other two Mei brothers. Although they knew that they might meet some unimaginable people after the gate of time and space, life and death had been opened, they were still more or less surprised when they saw the 10-year-older version of themselves. Young Xuemeng said, You. The older Xuemeng had only glanced at him, his eyes containing both envy and sadness. Then he gave a low laugh and said, I almost forgot. So, it turns out that I was like this more than 10 years ago. So stupid. The younger Xuemeng had no idea that he had been covered with a fool's poke. Before he could even react, Taxian Jun's fireball had already shot down on his back. Xuemeng moved to the side. He originally did not want to use Sui Huang, but at this moment, he reflexively pulled out this holy weapon, barely blocked the attack, and then staggered a few steps back. He finally managed to stabilize himself after a long time and angrily shouted as he rushed towards Taxian Jun. However, he was stopped by a sword flowing with a blue light. An older Mei Hangxiu stood in front of him with narrowed eyes. Since we're here, there's no need for you to do anything. He then turned to a younger Mei Hangxiu, smiled and said, the people of this mortal world is naturally the one to make up for the troubles caused by this mortal world. There's no need for you to ride on. Cultivator Mei is in his prime, so it would be bad if he were to be surrounded by bitter enemies and spend the rest of his life in the same boring position as me. Younger Mei Hangxiu. At this time, the formation that the older three used to lock onto Taxian Jun began to tremble violently. Mei Hangxiu stopped playing with his younger self and immediately turned around with a stern expression and said, Not good. His strength is much stronger than before. There's a new core in his body, Chu Wanning informed. Ah! Older Xuemeng used all his strength to cast the spell. The meridians in his hand were protruding. He gritted his teeth and said, I'm afraid we can't hold on for much longer than we expected. Shizun, you have to go as soon as possible and kill Hua Binan. Before Chu Wanning could reply, the younger Xuemeng asked, Killed Hua Binan? Why kill Hua Binan? not this. This. For a moment, he didn't know if he should call Taxian Jun, Amoran or something else. Older Xuemeng glanced at himself and said, he is a golem made from the body of a corpse. He can't be killed. But if the man behind him died, he too would soon be destroyed. Also he paused for a moment, barely able to split his arms. A fire-red formation immediately lit up beneath the young man's feet. It's dangerous here. You are too young to suffer. Go, return to the attacking army. No. I don't want to. Why are you hey? Even though the younger Xuemeng was struggling with all his might, he, like the younger Mei brothers, were quickly enveloped by the butterfly tide of spiritual energy released by the light array. Just as he sent the younger them away, he heard a crisp crack. Mei Hangxiu's expression changed, the formation is about to break, zimming. Xuemeng suddenly released all the spiritual energy in his body in the direction of Taxian Jun. His entire body was trembling as if he was doing his best to hold back a ferocious beast that was eager to break through the sky. Shizun, please go. Without needing Xuemeng to say anything more, Chu Wanning jumped into the air. His sword-like eyebrows knitted together as he looked at Xuemeng. I will be back very soon. Don't get hurt. I should be the one saying this to Shizun. Xuemeng gritted his teeth and said, please don't worry. Your disciple is no longer the same as before. I can endure it. He could withstand it. He had lived in this world for so many years that it had become a habit for him to endure, to keep going. He had endured so much without seeing the light of day, and now that he saw his Shizun, there was no reason for him to not be able to hold on. Chu Wanning sighed, I'm sorry for leaving you alone all these years. His voice was still ringing in his ears as he left. However, Xuemeng's tears had finally begun to flow. The man who was near to death in years did not look good when he cried. Even though the torrential rain covered his tears, it could not cover up the slight trembling of his shoulders and the redness in his eyes. Taxian Jun was going berserk in the formation. The light was like a crack in the ice of the heavenly lake, revealing its fragmented traces of danger. Just as he was about to break out of the encirclement, a red light shot towards him, locking him in place. Taxian Jun became even more furious. He raised his blood-red eyes and stared in the direction of the red light. Xuemeng looked into Taxian Jun's eyes. Give it up. I won't let him disappear in front of me a second time. As he spoke, he used up all of his spiritual energy. The veins on his neck throbbed and his eyes were as hard as steel. Shidi, in the past, you've always surpassed me. But today, Shizun is back by my side. I didn't want to disappoint him, so don't even think about winning against me. Mei Hangxiu reacted quickly and was shocked. He frowned and shouted, Zimming. What are you doing? With a bang, red light from the raging flames lit up behind Xuemeng. With a loud shout, he pushed out his palms and the flames followed the spell formation as they flew towards Taxian Jun. In an instant, it was as if 10,000 arrows had pierced through his heart and the shackles were all over Taxian Jun. Erg. Taxian Jun's eyes were bloodshot. He raised his head and gave a muffled groan as the surrounding spiritual energy instantly weakened by more than half. His black eyes slowly turned over and stared at Xuemeng like a resentful ghost. Black blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. On the left side of his chest, near his heart, there was a scar. It was a place that had once been pierced by Xuemeng's long Cheng saber. Now, over 100 of restricting spells that Xuemeng had condensed had pierced into his body. The sharpest one had once again pierced through his chest. Empty bloody holes. Both Mei Hangxiu brothers were shocked and anxious. Stop, you're already burning the power of your spiritual core. If this goes on, your spiritual core. You talk too much. Xuemeng sternly interrupted him. He stared at Taxian Jun. The Shikshan stared at his Shidi, while the assassin stared at a tyrant. This pair of brothers from the past stared at each other. Many years of life and death had been written off in one stroke. Although Xuemeng's expression was terrible, his eyes lit up with the blazing brilliance of the phoenix from back then. Everything I, Xuemeng, have learned in my life, I will use in this fight today. May Hanks you. As these words fell, in an instant, all that could be seen was the blazing flames that shot into the sky. In the raging flames, it was as if he had seen a young man with silver and blue light armor and high ponytail. He yelled noisily and grimaced in pain. I want to take first place in the Lingshan Mountain Sword Conference. Humph. I will have a godly weapon sooner or later. What's so rare about that? 50 years from now, no. 30 years only. I will definitely be able to make Shi Sheng Peak shine in my hands, with power that can shake all of the 9 prefectures. That young man had no scruples, did not fear the heavens nor did he fear fate, and declared his ambition. The firelight almost illuminated half the sky above Shi Sheng Peak. Many things from yesterday had been burned to ashes, some still burning into ashes. Everything had settled down, leaving only the current Xueziming. His eyes were steady and calm as he said, I don't seek success or fame. I just want things to go back to how it was before. End chapter.